Being home alone can be one of the most unsettling experiences. That feeling when every creak, every shadow, every unexplained sound makes your heart race. Most of the time, it's nothing, just your imagination playing tricks on you. But sometimes, it's not your imagination. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 terrifying true stories from people who were home alone when something went horribly wrong. These are real accounts from real people who experienced things that still haunt them to this day. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, make sure your doors are locked. Let's begin. This story comes from a guy named Marcus, who was 19 at the time this happened. He was home alone for the weekend while his parents were out of town visiting relatives. Marcus had the whole house to himself, and he was pretty excited about it. No rules, no curfew, just freedom. The first night was great. He ordered pizza, played video games until 3 a.m., and basically lived the dream of every teenager. But the second night, that's when things got weird. It was around 11 p.m., and Marcus was in the living room watching TV. The house was one of those older 2-story homes with a finished basement. His bedroom was upstairs, his parents' room was upstairs, and the basement was where they kept the laundry, storage, and an old workout room that nobody really used anymore. Marcus was half paying attention to some movie when he heard it, a loud thud coming from downstairs, from the basement. He muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Just silence. He figured maybe something had fallen over. They had boxes stacked down there, old furniture, that kind of thing. It wasn't unusual for stuff to shift around. So he went back to his movie and turned the volume back up. 10 minutes later, another sound. This time it was different. It sounded like footsteps, heavy footsteps walking across the basement floor. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He lived in a quiet neighborhood. There was no construction, no neighbors close enough for sound to travel like that. This was coming from inside his house. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the flashlight, even though he wasn't sure what he was going to do with it. His hands were shaking as he walked to the basement door in the hallway. The door was closed, just like he'd left it. He pressed his ear against it and listened. At first, nothing. Then he heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth, and then dragging, like someone was dragging something heavy across the concrete floor. "Hello?" Marcus called out, his voice cracking. The sound stopped immediately. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He stood there, frozen, staring at the door handle. Every instinct told him not to open it, but he also needed to know what was down there. He needed to know if someone had broken into his house. Slowly, he reached for the handle and turned it. The door creaked open, and he shined his phone's flashlight down the wooden stairs. The basement was dark except for the beam of light cutting through it. "Is someone down there?" he called again. Nothing. He took one step down, then another. The old stairs creaked under his weight, each sound making him wince. When he got halfway down, he could see most of the basement. The washing machine, the dryer, stacks of boxes, his dad's old weight bench. Everything looked normal, nothing out of place. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and actually laughed at himself. "You're losing it, man," he muttered. That's when he heard it. A whisper, quiet, barely audible, coming from the far corner of the basement near the storage shelves. "Marcus!" His blood turned to ice. Someone had just said his name. Someone was down here, hiding in the dark, and they knew who he was. He didn't think. He just ran. He bolted back up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and locked it. His hands were trembling so badly he could barely get his phone out to call 911. The operator answered, and Marcus was talking so fast he was stumbling over his words. He told them someone was in his basement, that he'd heard them, that they'd said his name. The police arrived within 10 minutes. 2 officers went down into the basement with their flashlights and guns drawn, while Marcus waited upstairs, his heart still racing. When they came back up, their faces were serious. "Son," one of them said, "there's no one down there now, but we found something you need to see." It led him back downstairs, and that's when Marcus saw it. On the concrete floor, near the storage shelves, someone had written a message in what looked like chalk or white paint. "I've been watching you." The officers immediately called for backup and did a full sweep of the house and property. They checked every window, every door, every possible entry point. The back basement window, a small ground-level window that faced the backyard, was unlocked. The latch had been jimmied open from the outside. Someone had been coming into Marcus's house through that window. And based on the message, based on the fact that they knew his name, they'd been doing it for a while. The police found footprints in the dirt outside the window. They found marks on the basement floor that suggested someone had been down there multiple times, moving things around, going through their storage. Marcus never stayed in that house alone again. Even now, years later, he can't go into a basement without feeling that same crushing fear. That feeling of knowing someone was watching him, waiting in the dark, whispering his name. He still wonders how many times that person had been in his house before he finally noticed. How many nights they'd been down there while his whole family was asleep upstairs. Some questions are better left unanswered. This next story is from a woman named Jenna. When this happened, she was 23 and living in her first apartment by herself. It was a small one-bedroom place on the third floor of an older building. Nothing fancy, but it was hers, and she was proud of it. Jenna worked as a nurse, and her shifts were all over the place. Sometimes she'd work days, sometimes nights, sometimes she'd pull a double and come home exhausted at 2 or 3 in the morning. One Thursday night, she got home around midnight after a particularly brutal shift. She was tired, her feet hurt, and all she wanted to do was take a hot shower and pass out. She locked her apartment door, threw her keys on the counter, and headed straight for the bathroom. She was in the shower when her phone rang. She ignored it. Whoever it was could wait until morning. But then it rang again. And again. By the 4th call, Jenna was annoyed enough to get out, wrap herself in a towel, and check her phone. 4 missed calls, all from the same number, a local number she didn't recognize. Before she could decide whether to call back, the phone rang again in her hand. Same number. She answered. Hello? Nothing. Just silence. Hello? She said again, louder this time. Still nothing. But she could tell someone was there. She could hear breathing. Slow, steady breathing on the other end of the line. Look, I don't know who this is, but it's late and I'm not in the mood for... The breathing stopped and a voice spoke, low, raspy, almost a whisper. I can see you. Jenna's heart skipped. What? I can see you, Jenna, in your towel. You should close your curtains. She dropped the phone and ran to her living room window. The curtains were open, just like she'd left them. Her apartment faced another building across the street, maybe 50 feet away. Most of the windows over there were dark, but one wasn't. On the 2nd floor of the building across from hers, there was a single lit window, and in that window, she could see a silhouette, someone standing there, completely still, looking in her direction. Jenna's hands shook as she yanked the curtains closed. She grabbed her phone from where she dropped it. The call was still connected. Who are you? She demanded. Close, aren't I? The voice said. Just across the street. I've been watching you for weeks, Jenna. I know your schedule. I know when you come home. I know when you're alone. She hung up and immediately called the police. While she waited for them to arrive, she kept all her lights off and stayed away from the windows. Her phone rang 6 more times, same number. She didn't answer. When the police showed up, she told them everything. They went across the street to check the building, but the apartment with the lit window was empty. Abandoned, actually. The officer told her it had been vacant for months. But someone had been in there. They found evidence that someone had been using the space. Food wrappers, blankets, a chair positioned directly in front of the window that faced Jenna's apartment. The police took a report and told her to call if anything else happened. They increased patrols in the area, but there wasn't much else they could do. The caller had used a burner phone, untraceable. For the next week, Jenna barely slept. She kept her curtains closed day and night. She started parking in different spots, taking different routes home, anything to make herself less predictable. The calls stopped. Days went by, then weeks, and she started to feel like maybe it was over. Maybe whoever it was had moved on or gotten scared off by the police. Then one night, about 3 weeks later, she came home from work and found something on her doormat. An envelope. No name, no address. Just a plain white envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was a picture of her, asleep in her bed, taken from inside her apartment. The photo was recent. She recognized the pajamas she was wearing. She'd worn them just 2 nights ago. Jenna moved out the next day. She stayed with her parents while she broke her lease and found a new place on the other side of town. She changed her number, changed her routine, changed everything. To this day, she has no idea how that person got into her apartment. The locks hadn't been tampered with. There was no sign of forced entry. But someone had been inside. Someone had stood over her while she slept and taken that picture. She still can't sleep without checking every lock twice, and she never, ever leaves her curtains open. The last story comes from a guy named Tyler. This happened about 5 years ago when he was in college. One of his professors was going out of town for 2 weeks and needed someone to house sit, water the plants, feed the cat, make sure the place didn't burn down. Tyler needed the money, and it seemed like easy work, so he agreed. The professor lived alone in a pretty big house out in the suburbs. 3 bedrooms, 2 floors, a big backyard, the whole 9 yards. It was way nicer than Tyler's cramped dorm room, so he was actually looking forward to it. The first few days were completely normal. Tyler would go to his classes during the day, then head to the professor's house in the evening. He'd feed the cat, watch TV, do his homework, and sleep in the guest bedroom. Easy money. But on the 4th night, things started to feel off. Tyler was in the kitchen making a sandwich around 10 p.m. when he heard something upstairs. It sounded like a door closing. Not slamming, just closing gently, like someone was trying to be quiet. He froze, butter knife in hand, and listened. The house settled into silence again. He figured it was just the cat. The professor had warned him that the cat was old and kind of weird, liked to push doors open and closed. So Tyler went back to making his sandwich. But then he heard footsteps, clear, distinct footsteps walking across the floor in the hallway upstairs. The cat was sitting right there in the kitchen with him, staring up at him with those creepy cat eyes. Tyler's mouth went dry. He set down the knife and pulled out his phone, ready to dial 911, but he hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if the house was just settling, or there was some explanation he wasn't thinking of? He decided to check it out. He grabbed a large kitchen knife, not the butter knife, and slowly made his way to the stairs. "Hello?" he called up. "Is someone there?" No answer. He climbed the stairs, each step feeling like it took forever. When he reached the top, he looked down the hallway. All the doors were closed, just like he'd left them. Except for one. The master bedroom door, the professor's room, was open. Just a crack. Tyler specifically remembered closing it earlier that day. His heart was pounding as he approached the door. He pushed it open with his foot, keeping the knife raised, ready for he didn't even know what. The room was empty. The bed was made. Everything looked normal. But the closet door was open now too. Tyler walked over and looked inside. Just clothes, shoes, nothing out of place. He was about to leave when he noticed something on the floor of the closet, partially hidden under a hanging coat. It was a backpack, not the professor's style at all. It was a black tactical-style backpack, the kind you'd see in military surplus stores. Tyler knelt down and unzipped it, even though every instinct told him not to. Inside, he found a flashlight, a box cutter, rope, duct tape, and a folder full of photographs. Photographs of the house, exterior shots, shots of the windows, shots of the backyard, and then photos of the professor. Photos taken from outside the house, looking in through the windows. The professor cooking dinner, the professor watching TV, the professor asleep in bed. Tyler's hands started shaking so badly he almost dropped the folder. Someone had been stalking the professor, and they'd left their bag here, which meant a floorboard creaked behind him. Tyler spun around, and his heart nearly stopped. There was a man standing in the bedroom doorway, tall, maybe in his 30s, wearing all black. He had a completely calm expression on his face, like he'd just walked in on someone doing something mildly inconvenient. "You weren't supposed to find that," the man said quietly. Tyler didn't think. He just ran. He still had the knife in his hand, and he raised it as he charged toward the door. The man stepped aside, almost casually, and Tyler bolted past him. He ran down the stairs so fast he almost tripped, his phone already out, already dialing 911. He could hear footsteps behind him, heavy and fast, closing the distance. Tyler made it to the front door, yanked it open, and ran out into the street. He didn't stop running until he was 3 houses down, screaming for help, screaming that someone was chasing him. Lights started turning on in windows. A neighbor opened their door. Tyler was gasping, crying, trying to explain what happened. The police arrived within minutes. They went into the house with guns drawn, but the man was gone. They found the backpack in the closet, exactly where Tyler had left it. They found evidence that someone had been living in the house's attic. There was a sleeping bag up there, food wrappers, and a small hole in the attic floor that looked down into the professor's bedroom. Someone had been living in that house for weeks, maybe months, watching the professor, waiting. The police ran the fingerprints from the backpack and got a hit. The man was a former student of the professor from years ago. He'd become obsessed with her, and when he found out she was going out of town, he saw his opportunity. They arrested him 2 days later trying to cross state lines. Tyler never went back to that house. The professor came home early and hired a professional cleaning service to deal with everything. She ended up selling the place a few months later, said she couldn't stand the thought of staying there another night. Tyler still has nightmares about that moment in the doorway, the calm look on that man's face, the realization that if he'd been 5 minutes later, if he'd been upstairs when the man decided to come out of hiding, he doesn't like to think about what might have happened. 3 stories. 3 people who thought they were safe in their own homes. 3 terrifying reminders that sometimes being alone isn't the scariest part. It's discovering that you were never really alone to begin with. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories. And remember, always check your locks before bed. Sweet dreams.